Have you ever witnessed someone treat another person so badly that it made you cringe? What if someone acted out of hate, only to find out they were messing with the wrong person? How often do people assume they have power over others just because of how someone looks? And what happens when life throws an unexpected twist, leaving the bully with no way to undo the damage? Most importantly, what would you do if you found out the person you just disrespected held more power than you could ever imagine? In this video, we'll take you through a gripping story of a waitress who let her prejudice get the best of her. Thinking that a quiet, elderly black woman was just another customer, she made a terrible decision, one that she would regret within moments. What she didn't realize, though, was that this seemingly ordinary woman was far from powerless. This story is more than just about disrespect. It's about how bias can cloud judgment and lead to decisions that people wish they could undo. By the end, you'll understand just how dangerous it can be to underestimate someone based on appearance, and how karma has a way of delivering justice when you least expect it. This video will not only take you through a dramatic moment filled with tension and regret, but also offer a powerful life lesson. You'll learn: 1. How prejudice often works in subtle, everyday interactions. 2. The dangers of assuming authority over others based on race, age, or appearance. 3. The power of respect, and how small acts of kindness or cruelty can have big consequences. 4. The unexpected twists life throws when you least expect them, and why humility matters in every situation. Throughout this video, we'll also touch on some lesser-known examples of similar incidents, real stories where people misjudged someone, only to discover the person had hidden connections or authority. In these cases, the consequences came swiftly, leaving those involved with unforgettable lessons in humility. But here's the real kicker. What happens when this arrogant waitress finds out she's not just insulting any customer, but the mother of the restaurant's owner? The fallout will leave you stunned. As soon as the truth comes out, her confidence crumbles. What will happen next? Will the owner let her get away with it, or will she face immediate consequences? You'll have to watch till the end to find out. This isn't just another story about bad customer service. This is a lesson about life itself. If you've ever wondered how fast things can turn around for someone behaving badly, this video will show you exactly that. The lesson is simple. Treat others with respect, no matter what, because the person you underestimate today might hold the key to your future tomorrow. So, make sure to watch the full video. Every moment counts, and the twist at the end will leave you thinking long after it's over. With that said, let's dive into this shocking story of prejudice, power, and regret. Picture this: a busy restaurant, the kind where waiters rush from one table to the next, barely looking at the faces of customers. Among the crowd sits an elderly woman, dressed simply, her face marked by age and experience. She doesn't stand out. No flashy clothes or designer bags, just a quiet presence. To some, she might appear insignificant, an easy target for anyone in a position of power to mistreat. This is where the real danger begins. The moment when someone assumes authority over another person simply because they believe the other is lesser in some way, whether by appearance, race, age, or even social class. It's a mindset that fuels countless everyday interactions, often unnoticed until something goes terribly wrong. And in this story, it does go terribly wrong. The waitress in this story saw only what she wanted to see: a frail black woman sitting alone at a table. In her eyes, this woman posed no threat, had no power, and most likely couldn't fight back even if she wanted to. These thoughts gave the waitress a sense of false superiority, the kind of confidence that often comes from dangerous stereotypes. It's easy to dismiss someone because of their age, assuming an elderly person is out of touch or weak, or because of their race, as if that somehow defines their place in society. When people cling to these shallow judgments, they fail to see the whole person in front of them. And worse, they act without fear of consequences, as the waitress did when she spat in the woman's food. She thought her hateful actions would go unnoticed, that her moment of cruelty would carry no weight. But that's the thing about life. It always finds a way to humble those who think they are above others. You see, this story isn't just about one waitress. It reflects a much bigger issue in society. Every day, people are judged unfairly based on things they can't control. How they look, the color of their skin, or how old they are. And it often happens in subtle ways, too. Shop employees following certain customers more closely than others, doctors dismissing the pain of older patients, or even managers treating employees differently based on assumptions about their backgrounds. It's a pattern of behavior that may seem small in the moment, but can have a devastating impact. The waitress's sense of authority wasn't rooted in her position as an employee. It was fueled by assumptions. She believed that because the elderly woman looked like an easy target, she could get away with treating her poorly. This sense of superiority, this false authority, blinds people to the fact that everyone carries a story, a history, and often hidden connections that could change everything in an instant. The truth is, power isn't always visible. Sometimes the most unassuming people hold the most influence. The elderly woman in this story wasn't just a customer. She was the mother of the restaurant's owner, someone with more power than the arrogant waitress could ever imagine. It's moments like these that remind us why it's dangerous to underestimate others. What seems insignificant today could cost everything tomorrow. The waitress didn't know she was playing with fire when she acted out of hate. She thought she could be rude without facing any consequences. But when the truth came out, when the owner walked in and revealed the woman's identity, everything changed. Her authority crumbled in an instant, and so did her sense of superiority. The waitress went from feeling invincible to realizing she had no power at all. There's something deeply unsettling about stories like this, and that's what makes them so powerful. They remind us of the fragility of authority when it's built on shallow judgments. The waitress believed that her job gave her control over the elderly woman, but the truth was that her behavior had put everything, her job, her reputation, and her dignity, on the line. And for what? A moment of cruelty. This incident is a stark reminder of a truth we often overlook. We never really know who we're dealing with. That person we assume is powerless might hold the key to our success, or in the case of this waitress, the power to end it all. Once prejudice takes root, it doesn't just stop at a rude comment or a dismissive glance. It escalates. It creates a false sense of entitlement that allows people to behave in ways they would never consider towards someone they saw as equal. The waitress's actions were driven by this mindset, and it cost her more than just her job. It revealed her character. And in that moment, she lost not just her authority but the respect of everyone around her. The most dangerous part: this isn't an isolated incident. Every day, people make similar assumptions, leading to moments of disrespect that can have life-changing consequences. And like in this story, the truth has a way of coming out, often when it's least expected and too late to fix. Imagine a bustling restaurant, filled with the sounds of clinking dishes and lively chatter. Among the patrons sits an elderly black woman, quietly enjoying her meal. Little does the waitress know that this ordinary day would unfold into an extraordinary drama, revealing how a single act of disrespect can lead to unforeseen consequences. In the heat of the moment, the waitress, overwhelmed by her own biases, decided to spit in the woman's food. It was a split-second choice driven by arrogance, a decision that she thought would go unnoticed. After all, who would believe that a frail, older woman could stir up any trouble? But she was wrong. In her quest for a moment of power, she opened the door to chaos. Disrespect doesn't just stop at the person being targeted. It sends ripples through the lives of everyone involved. The waitress may have thought she was acting with impunity, but her actions would soon catch up to her. When the restaurant's owner, her own son, walked in and recognized his mother, the atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. Gasps filled the air, eyes widened, and the restaurant fell silent. The moment the waitress realized who she had disrespected was the moment her world began to unravel. She had not only insulted an innocent customer, She had insulted someone with deep connections, someone who could change everything in a heartbeat. What seemed like a small act of defiance was now a potential career-ending mistake. In life, we often forget the power of relationships and who knows whom. The elderly woman was not just a mother. She was part of a community, a living testament to resilience and history. She had stories that shaped the restaurant's culture, memories that ran deeper than the waitress could ever understand. Now, with her identity revealed, the waitress faced the consequences of her actions. The owner, shocked and hurt, couldn't comprehend how someone he trusted could treat his mother with such disdain. The betrayal was twofold. Not only had the waitress wronged an elder, but she had also betrayed the trust of her employer. The respect she thought she wielded crumbled before her eyes. As the waitress stood frozen in shock, the other customers watched in a mixture of disbelief and fascination. They witnessed not just a confrontation, but a lesson unfolding right before them. It was clear that the waitress had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Conversations buzzed around the room. Some whispered in outrage, while others exchanged glances of pity for her. The judgment was swift, and the atmosphere was heavy with tension. In that moment, the waitress's future hung in the balance. Would the owner let her go? Would he confront her directly? The uncertainty gnawed at her, the consequences of her earlier actions now flooding her mind. Each second felt like an eternity, and the realization that she had become the center of attention brought a mix of dread and shame. When the owner finally approached, his expression was a mix of hurt and disappointment. He asked her, "How could you do this to my mother?" The words struck like lightning, igniting a firestorm of emotions. She had thought her actions were inconsequential, but now she stood accused, facing not just her boss but the weight of her own choices. The confrontation was intense. The other staff members listened closely, waiting to see how this drama would unfold. The owner's voice trembled with hurt as he demanded answers. As she struggled to find the right words, she realized that her impulsive decision had not only disrespected a woman but had also betrayed a bond of trust. In that restaurant, the repercussions of a single act of disrespect were on full display. Everyone in the room learned a valuable lesson. What goes around comes around. The waitress's actions, rooted in bias and arrogance, had unleashed a storm she could never have predicted. It highlighted how important it is to treat everyone with dignity and respect, regardless of their age, race, or social standing. And as the confrontation played out, people reflected on their own lives, considering how they might be unknowingly disrespecting others. The drama in the restaurant became a catalyst for change, a moment of awakening for all who witnessed it. As the dust settled, the waitress faced the harsh reality of her choices. She had thought she was acting in the moment, but she had ignited a chain reaction that would alter her life forever. In the end, the consequences of her actions weren't just about losing a job. They were about losing respect, trust, and her own integrity. The elderly woman, however, stood as a figure of strength, reminding everyone that sometimes the most unassuming people hold the greatest power. She had become a symbol of resilience, teaching those around her the importance of kindness and the dangers of prejudice. In the aftermath of the shocking confrontation, the restaurant was still buzzing with whispers and glances. The waitress stood in a corner, her heart racing, grappling with the weight of her actions. Meanwhile, the elderly woman, once a target of hate, sat at a table surrounded by friends who supported her. The tension in the room was palpable, with everyone wondering how this saga would unfold. As the owner processed the betrayal, he faced a difficult decision. Would he fire the waitress? Would he confront her harshly, or offer her a chance to redeem herself? The uncertainty lingered in the air, and the other staff members held their breath, anxiously awaiting his next move. It was a moment that would determine not only the fate of the waitress, but also the atmosphere of the entire restaurant. Just when it seemed like things couldn't get any worse for the waitress, the unexpected happened. The elderly woman, with a wisdom that came from years of experience, decided to speak up. "I think everyone deserves a second chance," she said, her voice steady and calm. Her words were like a gentle breeze cutting through the heavy tension, catching everyone off guard. The owner, taken aback, looked at his mother in disbelief. Here she was, the victim of disrespect, yet she was advocating for compassion. The waitress, who had spat in her food, was now being offered a lifeline. The elder woman's perspective illuminated a crucial lesson. Anger might provide a temporary release, but forgiveness opens the door to healing. The waitress, who had been bracing for an explosion of anger, felt the burden of her regret deepening. She had never anticipated this reaction. As she listened to the elderly woman's words, tears welled up in her eyes. It was a mix of shame and gratitude. The moment was pivotal. She realized she had a choice to make. Would she learn from this experience or allow her pride to stand in the way? The restaurant staff exchanged glances, sensing the shift in the narrative. Would the owner follow his mother's lead and show mercy? The atmosphere hung thick with anticipation. Everyone was aware that this moment could either destroy the waitress's career or serve as a turning point in her life. The owner stood there, wrestling with his emotions. He had always prided himself on running a restaurant built on respect and community. Now he found himself at a crossroads. He turned to his mother, seeking guidance. Her gentle smile encouraged him to consider forgiveness over anger. "You don't have to forget what she did," she said softly, "but holding on to hate will only hurt us." His heart ached at the thought of his mother, a woman of grace and dignity, being disrespected. Yet here she was, teaching him a powerful lesson about humanity. He realized that the waitress, too, was a product of her environment, someone who had perhaps faced her own struggles. It was time to decide if he would break the cycle of negativity or perpetuate it. With a deep breath, the owner finally addressed the waitress. "I want you to understand the impact of your actions, but my mother believes in second chances, and so do I." His voice was firm yet compassionate. "This is your opportunity to learn, to grow. I hope you take it seriously." A wave of relief washed over the waitress as tears spilled down her cheeks. For the first time, she felt seen, not just as a disgraced employee, but as a human capable of change. The owner's words resonated deeply within her, igniting a spark of hope. In that moment, the tension lifted, replaced by a new energy in the restaurant. As the atmosphere transformed, the elderly woman reached out her hand toward the waitress. "I forgive you," she said, her voice steady. It was a simple yet profound gesture that shifted the dynamics completely. The waitress took a tentative step forward, feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude mixed with remorse. Their hands clasped, bridging the gap created by disrespect and misunderstanding. This act of forgiveness rippled through the restaurant. Other patrons, who had initially sided with the elderly woman, began to shift their perspectives. They witnessed a powerful moment of humanity that transcended the incident. The waitress, once viewed as the antagonist, now stood before them as someone who was ready to change, to evolve. From that day on, the restaurant became a place not just of food, but of healing and understanding. The waitress worked hard to earn back the trust of her colleagues and the owner. Each day was a lesson in humility and respect, as she learned to treat everyone with kindness, regardless of their background. The elderly woman often visited, offering encouragement and sharing stories that enriched the waitress's life. As the weeks turned into months, the restaurant flourished in a new light. The owner and the elderly woman became champions of respect, emphasizing the importance of compassion in every interaction. Their bond grew stronger, showcasing the profound impact of forgiveness and the beauty of second chances. The news of the incident traveled fast. In a world where social media buzzes with opinions and outrage, the restaurant became the center of a heated debate. People began to share their views online, and the ripple effect spread throughout the community. Those who witnessed the disrespectful act rallied together, expressing their outrage and offering support to the elderly woman. Within hours, posts flooded social media platforms. How could a waitress treat an elderly woman this way? People asked. Hashtags began to trend, calling for justice and highlighting the need for respect and kindness in all interactions. The community was united in their anger, but they also sought to take action. People began to organize a rally outside the restaurant. They wanted to send a clear message that hate has no place in their community. Banners were made, slogans were crafted, and a sense of purpose ignited the spirits of those who felt strongly about the situation. It was a moment that brought together people from all walks of life, proving that a shared sense of respect could bridge any divide. As the day of the rally approached, excitement and tension filled the air. The elderly woman, initially overwhelmed by the attention, found strength in the support surrounding her. Friends and family encouraged her to speak at the rally, sharing her experience and promoting the values of compassion and understanding. On the day of the event, the streets buzzed with energy. Families gathered, holding hands, while others brought their children to teach them the importance of standing up against hate. The atmosphere was electric as the crowd swelled, eager to make their voices heard. News cameras arrived, capturing the unity of the community and the powerful message they wanted to send. As the elderly woman stepped up to the podium, her heart raced. The crowd fell silent, hanging on her every word. She took a deep breath and began to share her story, recounting the moment when the waitress had spat in her food. Her voice wavered, but she pressed on. "What happened to me is not just about disrespect," she said. "It's about a lack of understanding and kindness." Her words resonated deeply with the audience. She spoke of the need for empathy and compassion, reminding everyone that everyone has a story, and no one deserves to be treated poorly. Tears welled in her eyes as she said, "We must choose love over hate, understanding over ignorance." The crowd erupted in applause, their cheers echoing through the streets, creating a powerful wave of support. As the rally continued, something remarkable happened. People who had once been silent began to speak out. Some shared their own experiences of prejudice and disrespect, turning the event into a safe space for healing. The rally transformed into a gathering of stories where individuals could connect over shared pain and hope. Even the owner of the restaurant joined the crowd, standing alongside his mother. He shared his regrets about the incident and emphasized the importance of creating a respectful environment for everyone. His appearance brought a sense of reconciliation, showing that change is possible when one is willing to learn from their mistakes. Meanwhile, the waitress, who had been following the event from the sidelines, felt the weight of the situation crash down on her. She saw the support for the elderly woman, the love pouring out from the community, and it filled her with both shame and longing. She realized that the hate she had shown didn't just hurt one person, it reverberated throughout the community. With trembling hands, she decided to step forward. It was a moment that took immense courage, but she felt compelled to apologize publicly. Standing at the edge of the crowd, she raised her voice. "I am deeply sorry for my actions," she called out, tears streaming down her face. "I acted out of ignorance, and I understand now how wrong I was." The crowd, initially stunned by her presence, began to soften. Some people shouted words of encouragement, while others offered her forgiveness. The elderly woman, watching from the podium, felt a glimmer of hope. It was a step toward healing, a chance to show that even those who err can seek redemption. As the rally came to a close, a sense of community emerged stronger than before. The people had shown that love can overcome hate, and that support for one another can bring about real change. In the following days, conversations continued, and initiatives to promote kindness in local businesses were launched. The elderly woman and the waitress began a dialogue, starting to understand each other's perspectives and forging a new bond in the process. After the rally, the atmosphere in the community shifted. People were buzzing with a renewed sense of purpose, but amidst the unity, there was a lingering tension. The waitress's public apology had sparked a variety of reactions. Some applauded her courage to admit her mistakes, while others felt her actions were unforgivable. It was a moment that brought to light the complexities of human behavior and the path to redemption. In the days following the incident, social media became a battlefield. Posts circulated both for and against the waitress. Supporters argued for forgiveness, emphasizing that everyone makes mistakes. They shared personal stories of growth, recounting times when they too had acted out of ignorance. On the other side, critics felt that a simple apology was not enough. They demanded accountability and a deeper understanding of the consequences of her actions. As the community engaged in these heated discussions, a sense of unease settled over the town. It was clear that while some had moved toward healing, others were still trapped in anger. This division reflected a broader societal issue, the struggle to reconcile the desire for justice with the hope for forgiveness. Meanwhile, the elderly woman took time to reflect on her own feelings. She had received overwhelming support from the community, but she found herself torn. She wanted to forgive the waitress, yet the hurt lingered. Memories of the incident replayed in her mind, the shock of the waitress's actions, the humiliation of being treated with such disrespect. It was a reminder of how hate can blind people, turning them into something they never wanted to be. Encouraged by her family and friends, she decided to take a step back and seek understanding. I need to know why she did this, she thought. It was a difficult choice, but she believed that seeking answers might help her heal. With this decision in mind, she reached out to the waitress, suggesting a meeting. The waitress, who had been grappling with guilt, agreed to meet, hoping to make amends. When the day finally arrived, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Both women entered the coffee shop where they agreed to meet, each with a heavy heart. The waitress arrived first, her hands trembling as she played with her napkin, unsure of how to approach the conversation. The elderly woman walked in a few minutes later, her expression a mix of resolve and vulnerability. "Thank you for coming," the waitress said, her voice barely above a whisper. The elderly woman nodded, taking the seat across from her. There was a pause, an unspoken acknowledgement of the pain each had endured. "I've been thinking about that day," the waitress began. "I can't believe I let my anger control me. I don't even know why I acted that way." Tears filled her eyes as she continued. "I was stressed, and I took it out on you. It was wrong, and I'm sorry." The elderly woman listened intently. "I appreciate your apology," she replied, her voice steady but soft. "But it hurt me deeply. You didn't just disrespect me. You disrespected my entire life's journey." The waitress nodded, understanding the weight of her actions. "I realize that now. I wish I could take it back, but I can't. I want to learn from this. How can I do better?" As they talked, the conversation shifted from anger to understanding. The elderly woman shared stories from her past, her experiences growing up, the struggles she faced, and the lessons she learned about kindness and resilience. The waitress listened, her heart opening to the depth of the elderly woman's life experiences. "I've lived through so much," the elderly woman said. "I've seen how hate can destroy people. I've seen it in my own family, and it hurts. But I also learned that love can heal." The waitress felt a wave of emotion wash over her. "I want to be better," she said. "I want to change, not just for you, but for everyone I serve." Their conversation became a powerful exchange of stories, a moment where pain transformed into a shared understanding. As they spoke, both women began to see each other as individuals rather than symbols of their respective roles in the incident. The impact of their meeting spread beyond the coffee shop. Inspired by the dialogue between the two women, the community began to engage in discussions about race, respect, and the importance of empathy. Local organizations reached out, hosting workshops aimed at fostering understanding and combating prejudice. The elderly woman and the waitress decided to work together to facilitate these workshops, sharing their story as a way to promote healing. They spoke about the importance of listening and the need for compassion in a world often marked by division. Their partnership became a beacon of hope, showing that even the deepest wounds could begin to heal through open dialogue and mutual respect. As the workshops gained traction, attendance grew. People from different backgrounds came together to share their experiences, learn from one another, and build bridges where there had once been walls. The elderly woman's story resonated with many, but so did the waitress's journey toward redemption. Together, they became symbols of change. The discussions prompted community members to examine their own biases and the impact of their actions. Local leaders began to take notice, implementing initiatives that emphasized kindness and understanding within businesses and schools. It was a small revolution, ignited by the bravery of two women who dared to confront the uncomfortable. Through this journey, the community learned powerful lessons about respect, the importance of dialogue, and the capacity for growth. The elderly woman, once a victim of hate, transformed into a leader advocating for compassion. The waitress, who had acted out of ignorance. In the end, what started as a painful incident became a catalyst for transformation, proving that even in darkness, there can be light. The community emerged stronger, more united, and ready to face the challenges of the future together. In the wake of the incident at the diner, the community found itself at a crossroads. The waitress's actions had unleashed a torrent of emotions, igniting conversations that had long been buried beneath the surface. It was not just an isolated event. It had become a flashpoint for deeper issues regarding race, respect, and the importance of kindness in daily interactions. When the story broke, it quickly spread through social media like wildfire. Posts flooded platforms, some expressing outrage, while others offered support for the waitress. In a matter of days, the incident became a topic of local news, drawing attention from outside the community as well. People were shocked, angry, and bewildered. How could someone act with such blatant disregard? Everywhere you turned, the conversation lingered. In coffee shops, schools, and homes, people debated the waitress's actions. Some shared stories of their own experiences with discrimination, recounting moments when they felt belittled or judged based on their appearance. Others recounted moments of grace, times when kindness had transformed a difficult situation. As emotions simmered, a group of community leaders decided to organize a rally. The goal was to promote unity and discuss the importance of understanding and compassion. Flyers were distributed, social media campaigns launched, and soon, people began to rally around a cause larger than themselves. The day of the rally arrived, and the air was charged with anticipation. People from all walks of life gathered, their hearts beating with a shared purpose. There were signs, banners, and chants calling for respect and change. The elderly woman, despite her initial hesitation, found herself standing at the front of the crowd, her presence a powerful reminder of the pain that had sparked this movement. As speakers took to the stage, their voices echoed the feelings of the crowd. The elderly woman shared her story, recounting the moment she realized the waitress had spit in her food. Her voice trembled as she spoke of the hurt and humiliation. "I am more than just a face," she declared. "I am a mother, a grandmother, and I deserve respect." Her words resonated deeply with many. They saw in her not just a victim but a symbol of resilience. As she continued, tears filled her eyes, not just from pain, but from a sense of purpose. "We need to stand together against hate. We cannot allow this to happen again." The crowd erupted in applause, a powerful wave of support washing over her. In that moment, the elderly woman transformed from a target of hatred to a beacon of hope, her story igniting a fire in the hearts of those present. The rally was just the beginning. In the days that followed, workshops and discussions emerged across the community. Schools held assemblies focused on teaching respect and empathy. Local businesses began training employees on diversity and inclusivity, aiming to create safe spaces for everyone. The waitress, too, began to change. After attending one of the workshops, she realized that her actions had consequences far beyond her initial intent. She sought to educate herself on the impact of racism and discrimination. By sharing her story, she hoped to inspire others to learn from their mistakes and promote kindness in their daily lives. Through community meetings, both the elderly woman and the waitress began to connect more deeply with one another. They exchanged stories, shared laughter, and sometimes even tears. It became evident that they both were learning from each other. The waitress learned about the elderly woman's life experiences and the deep-rooted issues of prejudice. In return, the elderly woman saw the remorse in the waitress's heart and the desire to change. As they continued to collaborate, they developed a program aimed at fostering understanding and healing in the community. This program included storytelling sessions where community members shared their experiences, creating an atmosphere of vulnerability and honesty. Yet, despite the progress, not everyone was on board. Some community members resisted the changes, clinging to outdated beliefs. They viewed the conversations around race as unnecessary or even as an attack on their way of life. This resistance created tension, igniting more discussions, some constructive, others heated. One evening, during a community forum, a heated argument broke out between supporters of the rally and those who opposed it. Voices rose as accusations flew. "You're trying to erase our history," shouted one man, while another retorted, "It's about time we acknowledge the hurt that history has caused." The elderly woman watched from the sidelines, her heart heavy. She understood the fear that comes with change, yet she also recognized the importance of confronting uncomfortable truths. It was a delicate balance, finding a way to encourage dialogue without alienating those who felt threatened by it. Amidst the conflict, unlikely alliances began to form. Individuals who had previously been silent started to speak up. Some were inspired by the elderly woman's bravery and the waitress's willingness to change. They shared their stories of pain and struggle, revealing the scars that came from a lifetime of feeling marginalized. One woman, a local business owner, shared her experience of facing racism when she first opened her store. "I was scared," she said, her voice shaking, "but I refused to let fear dictate my life. I want my shop to be a safe haven for everyone." This testimony struck a chord with many, highlighting the importance of solidarity. People began to see that while they might not share the same experiences, they could support one another in their journeys toward understanding. Recognizing the need for education, local schools implemented programs that focused on history, culture, and diversity. Teachers began to incorporate stories from various backgrounds into their lessons, encouraging students to think critically about the world around them. In one classroom, a teacher facilitated a discussion about the impact of racism. "What can we do to create a more inclusive environment?" she asked her students. The answers flowed. "We can stand up for each other. We can educate ourselves. We can share our stories." These young voices brought a sense of hope to the community. They were determined to break the cycle of ignorance and hatred, aiming to build a future where kindness reigned. As the weeks turned into months, the community continued to evolve. The elderly woman and the waitress became central figures in this transformation, leading discussions and workshops. Their bond grew stronger, rooted in their shared experiences and the lessons they learned. One day, during a workshop, the elderly woman turned to the waitress and said, "You know, I think we've created something beautiful out of pain." The waitress nodded, tears in her eyes. "It wasn't easy, but I wouldn't change a thing. I've learned to see the world differently." Their partnership symbolized a new beginning for the community, one where understanding and compassion replaced fear and hatred. The journey was far from over, but each step forward was a testament to the power of connection and the resilience of the human spirit. In the aftermath of the racially charged incident at the diner, the air was thick with tension. The waitress's actions didn't just provoke outrage. They set in motion a series of legal consequences that would reverberate through the community for months to come. The elderly woman, now a symbol of resilience, faced a choice: to seek justice for herself, and in doing so, shine a light on the broader issue of racism in their society. After much deliberation, the elderly woman decided to file a formal complaint against the waitress. The decision didn't come lightly. She understood that it could lead to a long and difficult process, filled with scrutiny and judgment. But she felt compelled to take a stand, not just for herself, but for others who had endured similar experiences. Her daughter stood by her side, offering unwavering support. "Mom, this isn't just about you. It's about making sure this doesn't happen to anyone else," she urged. The elderly woman nodded, her resolve strengthening. With her family behind her, she felt ready to face whatever came next. The complaint was officially filed with the local Human Rights Commission. It outlined the details of the incident, describing the humiliation and distress caused by the waitress's actions. The document emphasized the need for accountability, pushing for measures that would protect others from experiencing such disrespect. As news of the complaint spread, the community reacted with a mix of support and skepticism. Some praised her courage, while others criticized her decision to escalate the matter. "Is this really necessary?" some whispered. "Can't we just move on?" The division in opinions only fueled the tension, with supporters rallying around the elderly woman and her family, while detractors labeled her a troublemaker. The Human Rights Commission launched an investigation into the complaint. Investigators conducted interviews with witnesses, including patrons who had been in the diner that day. Some recalled the incident vividly, their accounts adding weight to the elderly woman's claims. Others were hesitant to get involved, fearing backlash from the community. Amidst this backdrop, the waitress found herself in a precarious position. As she faced the scrutiny of the investigation, her emotions swirled. Initially defiant, she began to feel the weight of her actions pressing down on her. "I never thought it would come to this," she lamented to a friend one evening, her voice tinged with regret. "It was just a stupid mistake." As the investigation unfolded, public sentiment continued to shift. Local news stations picked up the story, broadcasting segments that featured both the elderly woman and the waitress. Social media exploded with commentary, creating a firestorm of debate. Supporters of the elderly woman organized online campaigns, sharing her story and calling for justice. "We need to stand together against racism," one post declared, gathering hundreds of shares. Meanwhile, the waitress faced her own backlash, with many condemning her actions and calling for her to be held accountable. After weeks of investigation, the Human Rights Commission scheduled a hearing to address the complaint. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation as community members gathered to witness the proceedings. The elderly woman arrived, flanked by her family, her heart pounding. This was a moment that could change everything. As she took her seat, she glanced around the room. There were supporters holding signs that read "Justice for all" and "Racism has no place here." But there were also faces filled with skepticism, some glaring at her with disdain. The waitress, seated on the other side of the room, appeared visibly anxious. The hearing began, with both sides presenting their cases. The investigators laid out the evidence, highlighting witness statements and emphasizing the emotional and psychological impact of the incident. The elderly woman spoke, her voice steady yet filled with emotion. "I never expected to face such hatred in a place where I should feel safe," she said, her eyes scanning the room. "No one deserves to be treated this way." When it was the waitress's turn to speak, she appeared nervous. "I never meant to hurt anyone," she said, her voice quivering. "It was a moment of anger, and I didn't think about the consequences." Her words fell flat against the weight of the evidence presented. The community watched closely as her defense attorney attempted to downplay the seriousness of her actions, arguing that the incident was an isolated event and not reflective of her character. "She is a hard-working individual who made a poor decision in a moment of frustration," the attorney insisted. But the elderly woman's family stood strong, ready to counter every point. They shared how the incident had affected their lives, detailing the sleepless nights and the emotional toll it had taken on their family. After hours of testimony, the hearing concluded, leaving everyone in suspense. The commission members would deliberate, and their decision would be announced soon. As the audience filed out, whispers filled the air. What will they decide? Will justice be served? The tension was palpable, a mix of hope and anxiety washing over the elderly woman and her family. Days turned into a week before the commission finally announced their decision. The elderly woman's heart raced as she sat with her family, awaiting the news. When the announcement came, it was met with a wave of mixed emotions. The commission ruled in her favor, declaring the waitress's actions unacceptable and urging the diner to implement new training programs, focusing on diversity and sensitivity. The waitress was required to complete a series of workshops aimed at understanding the impact of racism. The ruling sent shockwaves through the community. Supporters celebrated the decision, viewing it as a significant step toward justice and understanding. However, the backlash against the waitress intensified. Some labeled her a criminal, while others called for her to lose her job. The waitress, overwhelmed by the public response, struggled to cope. "I didn't realize how much this would change my life," she confessed to a friend. "I just made a mistake, but now I feel like I'm being punished forever." Her feelings of regret deepened, transforming into a haunting realization of how a single moment could have such lasting consequences. As the dust settled, the community began to reflect on the events that had transpired. The elderly woman emerged not just as a victim, but as a leader in the fight against discrimination. She became an advocate for change, sharing her story to educate others about the importance of empathy and respect. Workshops sprang up around the community, focusing on fostering understanding among diverse groups. The elderly woman spoke at many of these events, her voice steady and powerful. "We must confront hate with love," she urged, inspiring others to do the same. The waitress, meanwhile, took a different path. After completing her mandated workshops, she sought to make amends. She reached out to the elderly woman, hoping to apologize and learn from her mistakes. "I want to understand," she said, her eyes sincere. "I don't want to be the person I was that day." Their meeting was filled with tension, but it also held the promise of healing. The elderly woman listened, her heart torn between anger and understanding. "It's going to take time," she warned, "but I'm willing to try." As they talked, walls began to crumble. They shared their stories, revealing vulnerabilities that connected them in unexpected ways. The waitress's remorse and the elderly woman's strength formed a bridge between two very different experiences, highlighting the power of dialogue and understanding. Through it all, the community learned valuable lessons about accountability, the impact of racism, and the importance of compassion. The road ahead was long and filled with challenges, but it was also a journey toward healing and change, a journey that would transform lives in ways no one could have anticipated. In the wake of the shocking incident at the diner, the community found itself at a crossroads. The actions of the waitress sparked outrage, but they also ignited a flame of solidarity among those who believed in standing against racism. It was a moment that would define not only the elderly woman's life, but also the fabric of the community itself. As news of the incident spread, community members began to rally. The elderly woman, who had been a quiet figure in the neighborhood, suddenly became a symbol of strength and resilience. Local activists reached out to her, offering support and urging her to share her story. "Your experience matters," they insisted, emphasizing the importance of speaking out. The first community meeting was held at the local community center, a modest building that often served as a gathering place for residents. As people filed in, the air buzzed with anticipation. Some were there to show their support for the elderly woman, while others were unsure of what to expect. "Why are we even talking about this?" one man scoffed, his voice dripping with skepticism. "Can't we just let it go?" But the majority of attendees were determined to confront the issue head-on. As the meeting commenced, a local activist stood up, her voice resonating with passion. "This isn't just about one person," she proclaimed. "It's about a pattern of disrespect that we cannot ignore. We need to stand together to create a community where everyone feels safe." Her words ignited a fire in the room, and many nodded in agreement. The elderly woman shared her story, recounting the painful details of the incident. "I didn't just feel disrespected. I felt dehumanized," she said, her voice trembling but steady. "No one should have to endure that." The room fell silent, the weight of her words sinking in. From that moment, the community transformed. They organized rallies, workshops, and educational events focused on racism and respect. Flyers circulated, and social media campaigns sprang up, encouraging residents to participate and learn. "We are stronger together" became the rallying cry, echoing through the neighborhood as more and more people joined the movement. The community rallies were vibrant, filled with chants and songs. Signs proclaiming messages of unity and love dotted the landscape. "Stand up against hate," and "Love is stronger than hate" became the symbols of their fight. The elderly woman stood at the front, beaming with pride as she witnessed the support pouring in. However, not everyone was on board with this newfound momentum. A faction of the community felt threatened by the discussions and demonstrations. "Why can't they just drop it?" A local business owner grumbled, feeling the pressure from his customers who held differing views. "This is just stirring up trouble." Tensions rose when some of the dissenters attempted to counter the rallies with their own gatherings. They stood on street corners, holding signs that read "All Lives Matter," and chanting slogans that rejected the focus on racial issues. This only intensified the divide within the community, causing emotions to flare. During one particularly heated rally, things escalated. A confrontation broke out between supporters of the elderly woman and the counter-protesters. Words were exchanged, and soon it turned physical, with shouts filling the air. "This is supposed to be about unity," the elderly woman cried, stepping in between the two groups. In that moment, she became a bridge. Her presence reminded everyone of the reason they were there in the first place. "We cannot fight hate with hate," she urged, her voice calm yet firm. Slowly, the crowd began to quiet down. Following that day, the community took a more proactive approach. They organized workshops aimed at fostering understanding among different groups. These sessions featured speakers from diverse backgrounds, sharing their experiences with racism and discrimination. It was a raw and emotional process, but it opened many eyes. The elderly woman often attended these workshops, sharing her story again and again. With each retelling, her voice grew stronger, and her message resonated more profoundly. "We must listen to one another," she would say. "Only then can we begin to heal." Among those who stepped up to support her was a group of young students from a nearby high school. They had seen the impact of the incident on social media and wanted to make a difference. They organized a Unity Day, inviting students, parents, and community members to participate in activities promoting acceptance and understanding. As the day approached, excitement buzzed through the air. Banners were painted, food was prepared, and activities were planned. The elderly woman was invited to be a guest speaker. "This is our chance to show that we care," one of the students said, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. On the day of the event, the community gathered in droves. Laughter filled the air as children played games, families shared meals, and connections were forged. The elderly woman stood in front of a crowd once again, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I never imagined that my story would lead to something so beautiful," she began, her voice quaking with emotion. "This is what community looks like, supporting one another and lifting each other up." As she spoke, she noticed tears glistening in the eyes of some attendees who understood the significance of the moment. That day marked a turning point in the community's journey. The conversations about racism continued, but now they were filled with hope and a desire for change. As the weeks turned into months, the community continued to grow and evolve. Many businesses began implementing anti-discrimination policies and diversity training programs. They realized that addressing these issues was not just about the incident, but about creating a welcoming environment for everyone. The elderly woman became a trusted figure, often consulted on matters regarding community relations. She embraced her role, understanding that her voice could foster change. "We need to keep talking," she would remind her neighbors. "Change doesn't happen overnight, but it starts with us." One day, during a community meeting, the waitress unexpectedly walked in. The room went silent as eyes turned toward her. She looked nervous but determined. "I'm here to apologize," she began, her voice shaky. "I spent a lot of time reflecting on my actions, and I realize how wrong I was." Gasps filled the air, and some supporters felt anger rise within them. But the elderly woman stood, her heart racing. "Thank you for being brave enough to come here," she said softly, surprising everyone. I believe in forgiveness and understanding. Her words hung in the air, creating an atmosphere charged with possibility. The tension began to melt away as others chimed in. Some offered their own apologies for the anger they had felt, recognizing that healing required collective effort. As time passed, the waitress began attending workshops and community events, seeking to learn and grow. The elderly woman and the waitress, once polar opposites in a painful story, started to forge a new relationship built on understanding. They collaborated on community initiatives, working together to foster dialogue and reconciliation. Their partnership became a powerful testament to the community's capacity for healing and growth. They shared their story at local events, emphasizing the importance of empathy and forgiveness. "We are all on this journey together," the elderly woman would say, standing alongside the waitress. Their story spread beyond the community, inspiring others facing similar challenges. Media outlets picked up the narrative, showcasing how love could triumph over hate. The elderly woman's bravery and the waitress's transformation became a source of hope for many. People traveled from nearby towns to attend events and hear the story. "If they can find common ground, why can't we?" one visitor remarked, igniting discussions in other communities. The community, once divided, began to heal. Conversations about racism transformed from confrontations into discussions, where people listened and learned from one another. It was a slow process, but it was filled with promise. As the elderly woman watched the community evolve, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The pain of her past was still there, but it was overshadowed by the hope and unity blossoming around her. "We have so much work to do," she would remind others. "But together, we can create a brighter future." In the wake of the incident, the community faced the daunting task of healing. It was a complicated journey filled with pain, reflection, and ultimately, growth. Each day, the elderly woman who had become a beacon of hope felt the weight of the change resting on her shoulders. As she walked through the streets of her neighborhood, she could sense the undercurrents of tension still lingering. But hope had begun to take root, and she knew that together, they could create something beautiful. The pain of that day lingered in the air, thick like fog. Many community members struggled to process their emotions. For some, there was shame. For others, anger. The young people who had participated in the rallies were particularly affected. They felt an urgent desire to speak out, but didn't always know how. One teenage girl, Sarah, had been deeply moved by the elderly woman's story. Why should anyone feel afraid to go out and enjoy a meal? She wondered aloud. Her friends nodded, feeling the injustice. They decided to channel their feelings into action, organizing a series of discussions at their school, where students could share their thoughts on race, respect, and acceptance. But the road to healing wasn't without obstacles. As these discussions began, they attracted both supporters and detractors. One day, during a particularly heated discussion, a group of students opposing the initiative barged in. "This is ridiculous. You're just creating more division," they shouted, their voices echoing in the small classroom. The atmosphere turned electric, tension crackling like a live wire. Sarah felt her heart race. Would their initiative crumble before it even began? But then she remembered the elderly woman's words, "Stand firm in your truth." Drawing in a deep breath, she responded calmly, "We're not here to create division. We're here to learn from each other. Why don't you join us instead of shouting from the sidelines?" Her words struck a chord, and the opposing group hesitated. They looked at each other, uncertainty flickering across their faces. After a few tense moments, one student stepped forward, and to everyone's surprise, he nodded. "Okay, let's talk then." That moment became a turning point, not just for Sarah and her friends, but for the whole community. It demonstrated that dialogue was possible, even when opinions clashed. The discussions at school continued to grow, evolving into workshops and events where people from all walks of life could come together, share their experiences, and learn. Outside the school, the elderly woman continued to engage with local groups. She volunteered at community centers, sharing her story and emphasizing the importance of empathy. "We need to understand each other better," she would say, her voice filled with passion. "Only then can we truly heal." At one community event, the elderly woman organized a storytelling session. She invited residents to share their own experiences, creating a safe space for people to voice their fears, joys, and struggles. That evening, the community center buzzed with anticipation. As the stories unfolded, a young man named Jamal stepped forward. He spoke of his own experiences with prejudice, how he felt like an outsider in a place that was supposed to be home. "I had doors shut in my face," he began, his voice shaky. "But I also found unexpected allies. That's the beauty of this community." His words resonated deeply, and the room fell silent, absorbing the weight of his truth. Tears glistened in the eyes of many as they realized that everyone carried their own burdens. Jamal's story opened the floodgates, prompting others to share. Each story added another layer of understanding, breaking down walls that had long kept them apart. As stories flowed, the elderly woman noticed a shift in the room. There was a tangible sense of connection forming. People began to nod and support one another, realizing that vulnerability was a strength, not a weakness. "We are not alone in this," one woman declared, her voice firm. "Together, we can find a way forward." These gatherings became a regular occurrence, fostering deeper relationships within the community. People who had once felt isolated began to find solace in one another, forming new friendships across lines that had previously divided them. Just as the community began to find its rhythm, an unforeseen event shook everything. A local news outlet caught wind of the elderly woman's story and the community's healing process. They decided to feature it in a segment, showcasing the resilience and unity born from pain. The day the segment aired, the community gathered at the center to watch together. Excitement buzzed in the air, but so did anxiety. What would the world see? Would they understand the nuances of their journey? As the segment played, they watched with bated breath. The camera panned to the elderly woman, her gentle smile lighting up the screen. "Healing isn't just about moving on, it's about remembering and growing," she said, her words echoing in the hearts of those watching. But then came the twist. The segment didn't just highlight the positive changes. It also revealed the ongoing struggles and criticisms the community faced. Tensions began to resurface as some individuals commented on social media with hurtful remarks. "Why are they making such a big deal?" one person wrote. The backlash hit hard. Community members felt exposed and vulnerable. "We thought we were making progress," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "Now it feels like we're back to square one." The sense of unity they had worked so hard to build was threatened as people began to take sides. In the days that followed, the community divided into factions. Some wanted to keep pushing forward, while others felt it was better to retreat. The elderly woman watched in despair as the very unity she had fought for began to unravel. Realizing that they could not let fear dictate their future, she called for an emergency community meeting. "We cannot allow negativity to win," she urged, her voice strong and determined. "We need to stand together now more than ever." That night, the community center filled to capacity. Voices clashed, opinions flew, and the tension was palpable. But as the discussions progressed, people began to listen to each other once again. Sarah stood up, echoing the elderly woman's sentiments. "If we want to make a change, we have to keep talking, even when it's hard." The room slowly shifted as community members began to acknowledge their shared goals. They realized that while they might disagree on certain points, they all desired a safe and inclusive environment. The elderly woman took a deep breath, sensing a chance to mend the cracks forming in the community. "Let's focus on what brings us together," she said, her eyes glimmering with hope. "What can we do to support one another through this?" That question sparked a flurry of ideas. They discussed hosting more workshops, community potlucks, and even inviting speakers who could share insights on navigating difficult conversations. Slowly but surely, the community began to rebuild. They chose to focus on understanding rather than division. The elderly woman found renewed strength in her role, knowing that healing would take time, but that each step forward was vital. Months passed, and the community continued to grow stronger. The elderly woman and her allies organized events that brought people together in creative ways. Art workshops, music nights, and outdoor gatherings encouraged dialogue and connection. The younger generation, including Sarah, took the lead in many of these initiatives. They became advocates for positive change, ensuring that the stories of pain were not forgotten but transformed into lessons of resilience. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, the community gathered for a potluck. Laughter filled the air as families shared dishes from their cultures, blending flavors and traditions. The elderly woman stood back, watching as generations mingled and shared stories, feeling a warmth spread through her heart. This potluck became a defining moment in the community's journey. As night fell, the elderly woman found herself standing before a group of children, their faces glowing with excitement. "What can we learn from our stories?" she asked, and they responded with wide eyes and eager hearts. Together, they shared tales of triumph, laughter, and challenges, creating a new narrative that celebrated their differences while uniting them. But beneath the surface, the challenges of healing were still present. There were whispers of dissent, reminders of the past lurking in the shadows. Yet the community had learned that through storytelling and shared experiences, they could confront their fears and build a brighter future.